enforcement scheme be fairer and more proportionate. What the cost is and how difficult it would be to implement any alternative scheme. What is the potential impact on licence fee payers, particularly the most vulnerable? And what is the overall impact on licence fee collection? Decriminalisation of TV licence fee evasion would almost certainly have an impact on BBC funding. So if we decide to take this forward, it is right to consider that impact in the context of the overall licence fee settlement. We will begin negotiations on that later this year. The settlement and any move to decriminalise licence fee evasion will not enter into effect until April 2022. This new settlement is one of the ways in which the government will ensure the BBC delivers value for money for licence payers in the coming years. Transparency and accountability to licence fee payers must be at the heart of the BBC's funding model. That is why the government ensured that the current charter required pay transparency for staff earning over £150,000 per year, which has shone a light on overall costs as well as equal pay concerns at the BBC. It's also why, in the 2016 BBC White Paper, the government recognised the importance of greater transparency in the licence fee setting process, and that scrutiny of the BBC's finances should be carried out in an open and accountable way. Now, the government will work with the BBC on this process, and we will set out more detail on the approach to the next settlement shortly. After the negotiations for the next licence fee settlement, the mid-term charter review will take place between 2022 and 2024. This will look at the BBC's governance and regulatory arrangements. And ahead of the next charter review process, we will undertake a detailed look at the future of the TV licence model itself. The licence fee will remain in place for this charter period, which ends in December 2027. However, we must all be open-minded about the future of the licence fee beyond this point. This thinking began with the current charter, which enabled the BBC to consider how alternative funding models, like subscription, could supplement licence fee income. The charter also enabled the creation of a 3-year pilot contestable fund, using up to £60 million of funding from the previous licence fee settlement to create new opportunities for others to provide UK public service content. Now, this pilot fund is in two parts: the Young Audiences Content Fund, making children's TV programming, and the Audio Content Fund for public service radio content. These funds launched in April 2019 and they are performing well. Indeed, today the Audio Content Fund announced that it has made 25 awards in its first year, with over a quarter for regional programmes. This delivers on the objectives set out by the government for the funding to support regional voices. Now, these ideas and reforms will help build up the evidence base for future funding models ahead of the next charter review. These are not easy issues, and they will require some honest and at times difficult conversations. But there is a George Orwell quote etched onto the wall of BBC Broadcasting House that says, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." And I'm confident that we are going to reach common ground on these issues. After all, we've all got an interest in getting this right and seeing a BBC system the BBC that succeeds and thrives along with the public service broadcasting system as a whole. Because the PSB system, including ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, as well as STV in Scotland and S4C in Wales, provides a wide range of benefits to the UK, to our cultural offer and to our democracy. We would be much less informed and inspired as a society if we didn't have a healthy, pluralistic and universally available PSB system. And it is by far the largest driver of the UK production sector, each year investing around £2.6 billion on original programming, of which around £1 billion is spent outside London. PSBs remain popular with audiences, but PSB business models, including the BBC's, must adapt. The PSB system as a whole must reach audiences wherever they now are. It must support creative industries around the country, and it must provide for viewers of all ages if it is to remain relevant. Now, this will require commercial and technological innovation from the PSBs, and as the world around us changes, our laws and regulations must change too. All across my department's portfolio, we are making sure that the regulatory systems we have in place reflect the changing ways in which people work, live and interact. And as the volume of data online increases exponentially, we're making sure we have the right frameworks in place so people can have control over their data too. As online advertising plays an increasing part in our online experience, we're working to make sure it is fair, accountable and ethical. And our groundbreaking Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation is looking at complex emerging policy issues as diverse as facial recognition technology, deepfakes and bias in algorithms. So, it is time for the legislative underpinning of our PSB system to be looked at too. But many of the key pillars of the PSB system were established in their current form in the 2003 Communications Act. When we look back on 2003, an era of flip phones and dial-up internet, where Facebook and YouTube hadn't even been founded yet, it doesn't take long to recognise that the media landscape has moved on. So in this age of apps and on-demand streaming services, our concept of public service broadcasting should extend beyond just linear TV channels. And just as is the case when thinking about BBC funding, we must take a fresh and forward-facing look at what we need the PSB system to provide in the future. The first stage of this is Ofcom's PSB review, on which Ofcom will publish an update in the coming weeks. Ofcom has stated that public service broadcasting is now at a crucial juncture, and that it believes the time is now right for government, parliament, regulators and industry to consider the need for a new framework for public service media. I share this view. My officials are working closely with Ofcom to consider the major questions facing the future of the sector, and we will carefully consider the recommendations from that review. In one area, strengthening the digital prominence and discoverability of PSBs, the government has already committed to acting on Ofcom's recommendations. As services proliferate and programme guides become more complex, we need to make sure regulation supports the prominence of PSBs. This will help our PSBs compete and enable audiences to continue to find high-quality UK public service programming. Now, we will look at the potential for legislation to deliver this reform to PSB prominence and any wider reform emanating from Ofcom's PSB review. A fundamental appraisal of the PSB system will not only help our PSBs compete in this fast-changing market, but a sustainable and vibrant PSB system will also help drive our wider screen sector and creative industries. In 2019, the UK saw double the amount of spending on high-end TV show productions as there was in 2015. We need the PSB system with a modern and appropriately funded BBC at its heart to help us take advantage of this opportunity and to safeguard and strengthen the UK's world-leading television industry. Ladies and gentlemen, our broadcasters offer a window into the heart and soul of our nation. And our thriving media in the UK shows our creativity, our ingenuity and our commitment to the truth. Our mission as a government is to encourage a varied and diverse media which is well equipped to meet the challenges of the digital age. And the best way to do this is to make sure that the BBC and our PSBs remain relevant, accountable and offer the best possible value and content. And so we make no apology for being bold and ambitious about how we make this happen. Because at times of unprecedented change, as Blockbuster demonstrated, the question of relevance is the most important question of all. Thank you for listening.
So questions, can I just get a sense of how many questions? Lady there in the middle there. Name and organisation, please.
Hi, Libby.
Hi, Libby Vina, ITV News. Secretary, you mentioned the Orwell quote about if liberty means anything, it's letting people tell you what you don't want to hear. In that regard, what do you make of the fact that certain journalists have been banned from civil servant briefings and that certain ministers are told to boycott various television or radio programmes?
Well, one of the challenges of being media secretary is not only being in charge of, obviously, broadcasting media overall policy, but it's trying very hard not to comment on relations. So there's always going to be a relationship of mutual benefit, but also mutual some difficulty between, I suppose, media and politicians. I mean, look, Downing Street are very clear that actually the lobby, the system that we had for a long time, has enabled access to both the Prime Minister's speech, for example, this week, but also to all the briefings with the official spokesman. And there's always been a system of some technical briefings, particularly for those on those sort of particularly contentious or tricky issues which need that more detailed briefing. And this is a briefing, as I understand it, with David Frost, who actually is a political appointee, the Prime Minister's chief negotiator. But at the end of the day, I don't think it serves anybody for this as a debate to be continuing. And I hope very much that actually the best thing would be for the co-chairs of the press lobby here in Westminster to sit down with the Director of Communications and to work this out. Because, as I say, actually, I think although the media, we all like talking about ourselves, as do politicians like talking about politics and politicians, actually what's needed is communicating clearly to the public about the tricky issues that this government obviously is dealing with.
You don't think it's a way?
I don't think it is. I don't think that's the any kind of a motivation. As I say, I think there's always been a system of technical briefings on particularly technical issues, and that is what was happening.
Gentleman there by the window. Name and organisation, please.
Josh Arnold Forster, and I'm not in an organisation apart from RUSI. Secretary of State, one of the things, you referred to the BBC being one of the most trusted brands across the world. The problem that some people have suggested is that when you look at your proposals today, the way in which they will be perceived, which I accept may well be unfair, is it's perceived as an attack on the funding of the BBC, especially the World Service, because the government is unhappy about the sorts of challenges they can face if they're on the Today programme or they do the Andrew Neil interview. What can you say to audiences, the global audience, about the BBC and about how the trust in the BBC should be retained, possibly because actually the fact that you are seen to be attacking the BBC is a demonstration of the independence of the BBC?
Well, firstly, I don't think anyone should interpret today's announcements or discussion about the licence fee funding model as any kind of attack on the BBC, which I think is, as I say, is an incredibly important organisation, both in the UK, but as you say, around the world. It's been a beacon of freedom and light and encouragement to many people around the world. I think one of the things is to understand the ways in which the BBC is funded. So one of the recommendations, I think, from previous select committees has been more transparency about the funding. So actually, for a lot of the BBC international services, there is specific funding, for example, from the Foreign Office, which will be a matter for discussion around budgets and spending review processes to make sure that those international services very much continue. But I do think also, I mean, the lesson over the last couple of years is that if both Parliament but also those in organisations which are long established, including the BBC, don't listen to what people are saying, we will find that we become a cropper, we become more distant. And anybody who has campaigned in recent years, standing on doorsteps, will know there is more and more talk about, why do I pay the licence fee? What do I get for it? And people are saying, as I say, particularly younger generation, they're not consuming services in the way that we would, or our parents or grandparents would, and therefore we do need to look at this funding model. So I hope actually, in a way, we can take out all the perceived things about a tax or undermining all the rest of it. And actually, it is the government's duty, I think, to shine a light on this, not just on other organisations, and say, are we funding this the right way? Is this remaining relevant for the 21st century?
Lady there, second row. Name and organisation, please. We'll just wait for the microphone so we can hear your question.
My name is Claire Enders, Enders Analysis. My question is actually specifically about the timing that you've outlined. So you suggested that the licence fee settlement for 2022 would begin to be discussed later this year and become effective in 2022. And the change, if there were one, in the status of payment of the licence fee would also occur in 2022. What I don't understand is how you will know later this year, or indeed before, substantially well into 2022 or 2023 what the levels of evasion are likely to be. And they're likely to be very substantially higher than the Perry report suggested, because 4.5 million additional households, the over 75s, will be required to pay the license fee unless they qualify for a concession. So I'm trying to understand how you will understand later this year, or indeed next year, what the levels of evasion that would be very material, of the order of 300 to 400 million, and how that would work itself into a license fee settlement that you're thinking about this year. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. As you say, there are, and of course, don't forget there's a longer conversation to be had about the licence fee model itself. The conversation for 2022 is about the level of the licence fee. You know, one of the things that the BBC asked for back in 2015-16 was the ability to increase the licence fee by inflation, and that's exactly what we've seen. You know, we've laid the regulations this week, so the BBC is going to be able to charge from £154 for a colour TV licence to £157 later on this year. I think the figures you've just quoted actually are more than I have heard from the BBC for itself, so I think we will obviously need to look at that. I mean, I think the BBC obviously are quite clear about potential impact. They've named a figure to us. But of course, I also mentioned the simple payment plan, and there's been a pilot of 169,000 people who have used this payment plan, which is much simpler, who are at risk of perhaps evading it, more because they struggle to pay it. And actually what we found with that simple payment plan is it's made a real difference in terms of payments. So I think there is a discussion to be had about whether, in fact, non-payment of the TV licence evasion fine should be criminalised. I mean, criminal sanctions are imposed particularly for behaviour that is damaging to our society. You know, that's why we have a civil enforcement mechanism as well. And I think that is a separate conversation. Obviously, there is a financial conversation that no doubt the BBC and others will want to have with us too.
Gentleman there on the far wall. You just wait. Name and organisation, please.
John Burt, House of Lords. I have a very great deal of respect for the Secretary of State. All the issues that you raise are legitimate and merit full and proper public debate, but I have bad news for you. The previous gentleman who suggested that this will be seen as an attack on the BBC is correct, as I'm sure you well know. The BBC was founded 100 years ago. In that decade, in the 1920s, two critical things happened. One, the government of the day, Conservative government, threatened to take over the BBC in the general strike. Lord Reith went to speak to the Conservative cabinet. Churchill wanted to take it over. He persuaded a Conservative cabinet not to. That was a critical event which established the political independence of the BBC. The second, both main parties established the BBC under charter, not commercially funded, not state funded. And the essence of the charter, which has more than any other thing helped the BBC over 100 years to develop, as you recognise, into a peerless, though never perfect, institution, whatever your position inside it or outside it. Of course, it must always improve and develop. But the purpose of that charter has been only to enable government to look at the BBC, roughly speaking, at 10, this time 11-year intervals. Last week, Number 10 briefed, as you know, about the next Director General of the BBC. It said it wanted to be involved. It set out
What's
a
your
list.
Question? What's the question?
I'm coming
please,
to.
No speeches. A question, please.
Perhaps you just let me finish the thought.
I asked for a question. This is about questions. It's also for others to have a chance to ask questions as time is limited.
This week, way outside the charter period, you're instituting a review. This is pretty much unprecedented. Do you accept that?
Thank you very much. I think the lady... No, I don't accept the premise of the question. I don't accept the premise of the question. And actually, I'm glad, Lord Burt, that you raised, and obviously I think that you also, as a former Director General, so you've worked in the BBC. The BBC is going to be 100 years old in 2022, and any 100-year-old organisation, I think it's right that for the reasons set out, we're going to look at the overall model. But exactly as the lady has just said, in the midway, there's always a mid-year midway through the Charter, there is a review. This is not unprecedented to look at this particular issue. And as I say, there is a longer debate to be had about the overall licence fee model. This is a specific question about whether, in light of particularly the change that the BBC themselves have made in relation to the over 75s, whether in fact criminalisation of those who don't pay that fine for evasion is still the right thing to have in our society.
Sorry, did the lady there want to say anything more? Just because, if you name an organisation, please. Sorry to. Sorry.
Well, there's just a microphone there.
So people can't hear you.
Patricia Hodgson on your groundbreaking Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. And John and I worked together and I hope did a very great deal. I'm a great admirer of John's. I think the point is that back in the bad old days, there used to be licence fee reviews every year. And then they more or less settled at 3 years. And then you got the more or less 10-year look at the funding model. I would hope and assume that the BBC will think about how on earth it competes with the enormous number of global competitors in order to maintain the kind of quality and range of material that we've become used to and will continue to demand. And I expect that the BBC will want finally to add the subscription tiers for extra services while maintaining a licence fee core available to everybody. And how that is worked out over this period until 2027 seems to me to be the core of everything, and indeed the basis when you are renewing a licence fee during that consideration. It's going to be very complex.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just briefly agree. It is going to be complex, but I think it is a national debate that we do need to have. I can't stress enough that my respect and admiration for the BBC, for our public service broadcasting, but just because you respect and admire something doesn't mean that it has to stay exactly the same.
Because there's so many questions now, I think if we take the future ones as a brace of questions, and because
I'll write them down.
Minutes, if you're happy. Lady there, have been waiting patiently. Name an organisation.
Anna Mihailova from The Telegraph, Heineke. You talk repeatedly about the need for the BBC to remain relevant. It's a constant theme in your speech. Now, do you think it's appropriate for the government to boycott the Today programme and its 7 million weekly listeners, including in the wake of a terror attack? And will you be making representations to Downing Street about that?
And one other question, if just next to you on the same row, just take it on grounds of geographic proximity. Name an organisation.
Adam Bienkov from Business Insider. Would the government consider changing broadcasting impartiality rules to allow US-style news programming in the UK?
You want to take them both together?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And all I would say is that we have had everybody who wanted to come here today is extremely welcome. I think obviously there are decisions that are taken elsewhere about which programme, but individual programmes or channels, there is a massive amount of engagement between government ministers and the BBC and different channels, as well as many other, all other broadcasters. It's not that we are not being questioned by broadcasters in terms of relevance. And I think absolutely, a 100-year-old organisation offering high-quality programming with the range and breadth that we see from the BBC, absolutely relevance for all of us has to be a key question, particularly when at the moment people are being asked to pay £154 a year to consume content, and that's been expanded, as I say, thanks to closing the iPlayer loophole in the last few years. Adam, in relation to impartiality, that's not a part of any of the consultation or suggestions. As I say, I think as Lady Hodgson has suggested, it's going to be a complicated set of issues, but it is relating to particularly looking at funding. I've no doubt people want to throw other things in, but that's not on the government's agenda. Well, it's not on our agenda. It's not part of what I'm talking about today or the consultations that I'm expecting.
Two people there in close proximity. Lady there on the third row from the back, then gentleman behind her.
Hi.
Name an organisation.
Elizabeth Howcroft from Reuters. When it came to the Huawei decision last month, you said that there was a market failure when it came to the kind of providers available. What will you be doing to address that and make it so there's more choice?
Gentleman behind you.
You say
Name an organisation, please.
Norman Smith, BBC. You say the BBC needs to adapt for the new streaming era. Everyone in the BBC knows that. What I'm not clear about is why you think decriminalising or moving to a civil enforcement scheme in any way assists the BBC in meeting that challenge, because the view within the corporation is it weakens the BBC to the tune of £200 million a year, quite possibly more. In other words, it puts us in a worse place to meet the challenge. And doesn't that just underscore the suspicion that really what is going on here is a bit of a punishment beating for the BBC from a government who resents the attitude of the BBC as they see it during the Brexit referendum and the general election? It's a bit of political payback.
Look, let me answer Norman's question first. I utterly refute that last suggestion, and I think, as I said, really in answer to the question over here, if you have to criminalise the non-payment of a licence fee in order for the BBC to say it has the funding to remain relevant, then that would suggest to me there's something wrong with the model. And as I say, we impose criminal penalties as a society on behaviours that we don't want to see, we think are harmful. We don't want to see anybody else to think that they are going to be able to get away with it. The way normally, if you have a fine or a payment of an amount of money that is not paid, it is enforced through a civil penalty system. And as I say, the people, including those over 75, who are now going to be paying the licence fee, I think it is right that actually at this stage we're looking at decriminalisation. But of course, the whole point of having a consultation, so open for 8 weeks, there's no doubt the BBC and many other people in this room watching online will absolutely be able to have their say to make those points. In relation to the Huawei decision, well, we've had a very we are very determined, as you say, that another provider of 5G equipment is needed in order to provide that resilience to our very important 5G network and 4G network as well, that we want to see across the country. And so my department, working with others across government, will be looking at how we are able to work. And it may well be we have to work with our international allies as well to make sure whether we either get another provider who's operating elsewhere to operate in the UK, or potentially to perhaps have another company that's able to offer that equipment so that we are able to have that resilience in our system. So I can't tell you today exactly what that looks like, but those are the conversations that are happening.
I think we're out of time.
Okay.
No. Thank you. My apologies to anyone we may have disappointed. This will not be our last intervention in this space, so we look forward to welcoming you back. Thank you, Secretary of State. Thank you for questions. Thank you, everyone, for the questions and debate. Look forward to welcoming you back all soon.
Thank you, Policy Exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you.